Welcome back to the Horror Video Games. Today I'm talking about what could have been done with Layers of Fear. So far I've been talking about the paintbrushes and the paintings in this game, and I feel I have a desire to explore the potential and possibilities of horror games by using my imagination. I mean, the thought that occurred to me was, how about they based the game off the life of Walter Sickert, who was an English Impressionist painter, and he was very famous for his very dark, bleak paintings. He was often accused of being Jack the Ripper, who was a serial killer based in London who brutally murdered 5 women in 1888. The reason I mention Walter Sickert in relation to Layers of Fear is because it would be historically and thematically consistent with the era of the game. I mean, there are so many different ways the story could be inverted if we take the kind of Jack the Ripper storyline. For example, we could take the Condemned example where you're hunting down the serial killer and the painter is the serial killer, so it's drawing upon art history and you're actually hunting Jack the Ripper. And then perhaps as you're hunting the killer down, you find all these paintings which are seen in Layers of Fear, and then these paintings give clues to the whereabouts of the killer. And this will give you an insight into the painter's state of mind, and I feel just changing the story in a slightly different way, it could lead to a profoundly different game. What we have at the moment is a disturbed painter, his art career is falling apart, he's emotionally unstable, and he's painting very aggressive paintings. Now, we could very easily change this storyline into something else, which could draw upon the history of Walter Sickert and whether he was or wasn't a serial killer. And also the types of paintings that Walter Sickert created, which were very disturbing, but also rich and full of imagery, which could be interpreted in many different ways. Now, the interesting scenario in this example, what happens if the protagonist is the serial killer? What happens if the serial killer is the painter, the genius painter, and you're actually being hunted by the police and you're getting away with these grisly murders, but you make these beautiful paintings after you've murdered these people? And what kind of game would that be? I mean, what would the storyline involve? I mean, how would the gameplay mechanics play out? I mean, in terms of murdering these people? I mean, what were your motives for killing these people? And then all these kind of interesting character development opportunities could arise from kind of profiling the serial killer and what were his motives. And I think the real problem with a lot of games, especially horror games, is that the bad guy just isn't developed enough and his motives, and I want to do a separate video talking about this theme. If you were playing as the serial killer character, it would raise some very disturbing, uncomfortable moral questions in the player. I think it would make you question your own values, like, should there be an option not to kill these people? And why are you killing these people? And what purpose do these murders serve? I mean, a game laid out in this fashion could lead to many, many unanswered questions in the player's minds. And also it would be very conflicted, actually, because if you're playing the killer, then surely, if perhaps you're the anti-hero or something, how would the player feel about murdering all these innocent people and then being chased, and say you get to the conclusion of the game and you're caught by the police or you're killed by the police or something like this? I mean, how would the player feel about this? Say you get to the end of the game, you've murdered 12 people and then finally get gunned down. I mean, how would you feel about that? I mean, you haven't won, so you haven't survived, you haven't conquered anything, you've been defeated. Like, how would that make you feel? If you take any horror storyline and just invert it and turn it on its head and see what happens, I mean, why can't we do that? That would be interesting. So I really want to promote this idea of using my imagination to explore the possibilities of horror games and how far the genre could go and how far we could push it. So in summary, I think that endless questions and themes could be generated by simply changing the perspective, motive and context of the protagonist. So what do you guys think? Do you think perhaps the storyline from Condemned could have been used in the context of Layers of Fear? Do you think perhaps the protagonist from Layers of Fear could have been perhaps Jack the Ripper? Do you think perhaps that protagonists in horror games should be bad guys, for example? I mean, what kind of moral questions would that serve up, and why don't we do more of it? So those are some of my thoughts on this subject, and I really appreciate all your comments and feedback and getting involved with these interesting discussions on this channel now. It's really exciting me. Don't forget to comment, rate and subscribe. This is the Horror of Video Games, and I'll see you next time.